I do think it interesting though, the way we talk about unions, you know? Whenever it's when it's with unions, sometimes unions overstep, What are your thoughts on unions? Oh, they have their good and their bad. Nobody talks about corporations that way, right? Because corporations are infinitely more powerful than the unions. Unions aren't really an independent economic body. They're just kind of a internal regulatory mechanism, a way of, forming a competing power group. But whenever people talk about unions, it's always this like, well, they have their good and their bad. But when we talk about corporations, it's sometimes bad things happens because of corporations, but their existence is taken as a kind of existential for granted. Like it's just like a point in reality. You know what I mean? And the thing is, right? They might be right because corporations self-perpetuate because they have their own power. They have their own mechanisms for enforcing political will, but unions don't. Which is why in the United States, even though it's illegal to fire people for unionizing, it happens all the time. And of course, you can never really prove it. I mean, it's, uh, you know, somebody talks about unionizing and then they get fired for poor attendance because they missed one day. You can always get that. I mean, there's no way to stop that from happening. The right to work laws and everything. So right now, like it feels like unions are a dying flame and corporations are a forest fire that has eclipsed the entire, Pacific Northwest in terms of like what needs to be protected. You get what I mean? I think right to work laws refer to a few things, right? There is the compelled union participation. I think there's also something about whether or not non-union members have to work alongside unions in contractual negotiations. There's something to that. The thing that gets me a little bit is that there are so many rights that we're willing to leave to the market when we take political democracy to be sacrosanct. There are things we think you shouldn't be able to sell off, right? Like right now in America, the idea of being able to literally sell away your rights is, I guess there are some edge cases where this is doable. If you're a soldier, for example, you do lose
Yeah.
some rights, but in a broader sense, I mean, the idea of a democracy is kind of like you don't really get to choose. That's the fun of it, right? You don't get to choose whether or not you get to choose. You live in a democracy. That's it. Sorry, and I'm fine with that. I'm okay, for example, with making it, you shouldn't be able to sell yourself into indentured servitude. Even if you sign a contract, cross the T's, dot the I's. The state busts in. They're like, "Oh my God, you own 50 slaves," and the slave owner's like, "No, check it. They've got signed it all." I'm okay with that. Being illegal. Not even to speak of the coercive potential of that, but there are. I'm okay with those limitations. And with regards to the union thing or like economic democracy, it's always like well, what works? What do people want? What are people willing to fight for? And I just don't think that works. Maybe workers aren't willing to like unionize to the extent that they used to. Maybe they're not pushing as hard as they should.
Mm.
I feel like the average American would sell their right to vote for $1,000. I really do. I think the 50% or more of Americans, if they could get $1,000 from the government to forever waive their right to cast a vote in an election at any level, I think they would do it. I genuinely do think that. Um,
What's really
maybe I'm
sad is I can't in good faith sit here and yell at you that you're wrong about that. I don't think saying the majority
maybe
is
I'm being
necessarily
hyperbolic with that,
accurate,
but
but
a lot of people, like a
I,
lot, a
I
lot of people, yeah.
I'd agree that sadly that may be the case.
And people do this all the time with their right to privacy too. We do that online, right? We
Yeah,
know social media companies are selling our data to we know they give it to the NSA because Snowden leaked those documents. What was it, Prism? We know that. We know they sell it to advertisement companies. And I swear to God, I don't know how much of this is me going insane, how much of this is real, how much of this is conspiracy. But in my house, I don't have one of those Alexa home things. I have a computer with mics. I'm talking into one right now, and I will get advertisements for things that I've been talking about. I swear to God, I can be in a room with the computer off, and talk about like some incredibly specific piece of equipment and get advertisements for it, or on Amazon they'll go this you would also be interested in, like I buy something on Amazon and it's like cat food, and then the thing you might also be interested in, car snow windshield wiper replacement fluid. Like what the like
Well, I can tell you all about that.
Oh, sure. Well,
I can tell you all about that.
Please do. But I'm just saying, like, all of this, people aren't great at individually making choices to secure their rights. I kind of think we have to force those rights on them, as silly as it sounds. And economic democracy is one of those things. If we want to force people into their unions, I'm honestly okay with that. Maybe people shouldn't get a choice. Maybe you have to sit in the big boy union seat. No matter what, right? Maybe that's kind of like the situation we have right now with voting, where you can't sell it off or anything. The right to privacy is a lot of this is just really abstracted, right? That's the issue. We don't have good brains for this kind of stuff, or maybe we're not educated for it. We're educated to be highly individualistic. Look out for yourself. But unfortunately, we don't live on an island. Acting in a collective fashion can secure individual interests. So, for example, our right to privacy, right? Our right to privacy to your average person means shit. They do nothing to protect it. They're not on Tor, they're not onioning or whatever. They're not protecting all their data with VPNs or any of that crap. With democracy, people will sell off their right to vote. I'm guessing here, but I really think that would happen. And with unions,
Yeah.
it reminds me, the average person's mindset towards unions reminds me, I think it was the Amazon. They had this Subway advertisement where they were like, do you know how much union dues can cost? You could go buy a PS3 or something, or some crap like that. I mean, it must have been a PS4. It wasn't that long ago. Yeah, and I think that sells to a lot of people. Oh, that was Delta Airlines. That sells to a lot of
Delta did
people.
that?
I guess so. Multiple people in chat said that, right?
Oh
Right off.
God. Now go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm only saying, like, one of the reasons why I come down hard on this is because I feel like so many of these rights we're not good at fighting for them individually. Now, I'll tell you which group is really good at coordinating their individual efforts to form a collective action, and that's the bourgeois, okay? There aren't many of them, and they are very good at levying their, I guess Marx would call it their class interest, right? Class consciousness. They act in their own interests very effectively. They're quite good at that. If you look at the ultra wealthy, there is a massively disproportional set of involvement in a ton of things, from political opinions to campaign investitures to, there are a ton of metrics that you can track, but they know what they're about. They're educated, they're actualized, they've got free time, they're not bogged down by 3 part-time jobs or kids they have to take care of with no nanny or partner to help. They are on it. But the average person, I feel like you have to help them along a bit. And you can do that through normalization, which I try to do. And sometimes, every once in a while, I fall asleep and I dream that, Huey Long smacks the hammer down, and I wake up and unions are mandatory now. Fuck you. And everyone just just wakes up and they're like, oh, okay. People bitch about it, but give it 10 years and people will treat it like it was never any different. To me, it's all different tentacles of the same octopus, right? I mean, the Chinese government has billionaires working directly with it. There's a direct synthesis in the interests of the party, of the state, because it's not a democracy, and of the corporations under their beck and call. American corporations trade freely with China. We rely on Chinese manufacturing and industry. A ton of plants over there are owned by America, and a ton of stuff over here is owned by them. It's the same monster, capital. And in their case, authoritarianism, more of it than what we have. But I think the problems are pretty similar. Antagonisms brought about by people with different class interests. But I mean, I think it's fundamentally an extension of the same issues. And as time goes on, more and more of our freedom-loving American corporations are going to kowtow to Chinese interests. We've already seen this with the NBA. We see movies that are being promoted over in China have, like, black people removed from the posters. We see, like,
Jesus. Yeah.
Chinese-owned mega corporations that, hey, like League, Tencent, You know, there are weird restrictions associated with that. And as time goes on and American cultural hegemony starts to wane in favor of China's, we're going to start to enjoy more and more pieces of media that are adjusted for Chinese cultural interests. Probably going to see a lot less skeletons, since that's considered a cultural taboo over there, and they don't include that in their media. They censor it, actually. The government does. So yeah, we have that to look forward to. And all of it, in my opinion, at the end of the day, is a lack of democracy, political and economic. But yeah, I mean, hopefully whatever problems we could solve here in the States, we could solve there too. What a stupid little baby.